410s. We need to go to 410 work days.
That would be amazing. But I'll also bring it to a scholarly conversation on how the system, particularly the system in the US, does not support working parents out of the home. So other countries do a much better job than the US. And I high pitch that much for very particular reasons. So the system is broken, which is part of the reason why we have the career view. So we talk about different aspects of how we can find some solutions and be solutions oriented around different parts of the system, particularly within career services and higher ed and beyond. Jonathan, Dr. Bates, Sean, and I see that it's 2:06, so let's do this.
Well, let's go ahead and get it kicked off.
So yeah, we have LaTonya Wilkins here. Very gracious for you taking the time. Maybe we'll jump into it with what Dr. Bates was talking about in terms of, you know, Thanksgiving's coming up, the times. What does it look to take a break from work to find revitalization? Maybe if you can just introduce yourself and your work and that connection to emotional intelligence and awareness and that need for us to be in tune with ourselves and others.
Yeah.
And before I do, actually, if I could just introduce the co-host of the Career View, sorry for this, Dr. Bates from North Carolina, Lynette from Northeastern University, and then Sean Pewitt from Wayne State University, and I'm John Stoll from Oregon State University. So with that, LaTonya, please, handing over the mic.
Yeah, so I am really looking forward to next week. I don't know about all of you. I've tried to make it so I'm not doing any client work. It's so far so good, except for Monday. And a little introduction for me. I'm LaTonya. I inspire meaningful and powerful awareness in people and organizations, and I do that through keynote speaking. I do it through executive coaching. I am a credentialed executive coach through the International Coach Federation. And I also do that through other customized solutions in which I partner with clients and usually includes some sort of blend of keynote speaking workshops and coaching. And so a lot of the work I do is around change and leadership. And so I've been doing a lot of work around DEI, especially around culture change around DEI and working, first of all, building some awareness around it and then coaching leaders to actually do the work. And I also do a lot of this work around just general culture and leadership changes and industry changes. So lots there. My career has kind of varied throughout different industries. I started in nonprofit. So when I got out of college, I got a degree in psychology, and I thought I was going to save the world. And so I worked for a social service organization that served women and children. My boss was nuts. She was very crazy and she was abusive. And so, and I'm just keeping it real now, but extremely abusive. And
LaTonya, if I can interject, if you can mention specifically those institutions and geographical location, because the Career View Zoom show is, and whatever you feel comfortable, but it is, we are national. So I would just want people to kind of figure out where you are nationally.
Oh, I'm
Even
in Chicago.
I don't want to mention institution, but.
Yeah, I'm in Chicago. I won't mention that one because, again, it's a good organization that serves women, abused women and children, but the leader at the time wasn't so great. So I ended up going into recruiting, and I had always had an interest in HR, and I ended up working for a staffing firm, and then that staffing firm turned into facility staffing where I traveled all over the world, set up new staffing operations. And then from there, I ended up, I think it was 9/11 happened, and the world was shaken up. And so I had to figure out what I was going to do next. And I decided to go to business school. So I went to business school at the Kelley School of Business, Indiana University. And Ended up going into talent management, and that's when it was a very new field, and there was like talent succession planning. So what I did is my job focused on identifying and developing folks to make it to the C-suite or to manage countries internationally. So that was mainly my job. Very corporate, and I wanted to do more. I learned a lot from that, and that's when I went into leadership development. And then I was doing that for a commercial real estate firm, leading leadership development. I wanted more meaning in my life, and I knew I wanted to start my own business. I wasn't really sure what that was going to look like. I had hired a coach to partner with during my leadership development days, and she kept encouraging me to do coach training because she thought I'd be a wonderful coach. And I said, I'm already a coach. And she's like, oh, no, you're not. You really need to, you don't really know what coaching is. And that's true. And I've found that coaching is an overused word, and that I had not really been coached until just, 3 years ago. I'd been advised a lot. I'd been over mentored, but I'd never been coached. I'd never been empowered I never had someone that was in a position that was more powerful than me assume that I was creative, resourceful, and whole, and that they could coach me to make my own decisions, right? I'd always been told what to do. And so I ended up, I ran into a friend at a tech recruiting event of all places. He thought he should introduce me to the dean of the Geese College of Business, the University of Illinois. Really liked my background. They were looking for someone to run talent from corporate. Ended up meeting with the dean of the college and ended up doing my first plunge in higher education. Very interesting. It was mainly not a huge transition because it was a business school, and the way that the dean he runs it like a business. And so I was heading up talent at the Geese College Business for 4 years. I taught some classes there. During that time, I also ended up getting my coaching certification, ended up taking all the courses, and then coaching a bunch of folks. And then I started my business, and it was a lot of work and a lot of hours, and I wasn't really sure what I was going to do exactly with my coaching. And so I ended up pairing it with what I do best, speaking and workshops. And I work with, as an executive coach, I work with underrepresented groups. I work with LGBTQ folks. I work with people of color. There's not a lot of coaches of color out there, so I'm really happy to be in this industry because I get a lot of, especially Black women and executive Black women reaching out to me. Also queer people of color that have never, when they're looking for a coach, there's not any out there. And then I also do, I do some coaching of more emerging leaders as well. So how does that relate to Thanksgiving? Well, I will tell you, Jonathan, I have not been good with managing my time. I would say through COVID, I've been busier than I've ever been in my life. And I think it's because I've been called to fix organizations. And I haven't really stopped because I owe it to my grandma, who's my inspiration, and all the work she did when she moved my mom, my aunt, my uncle, took them on a bus, escaping Mississippi, the Jim Crow laws. My mom didn't want to drink from a colored fountain, and so she moved us all to Iowa. And she's always been my inspiration. She passed away in March, and so my mission is to carry on, what she did for us. She was always a light in the world, and that's what I want to. That's what I aspire to be. So with time management and COVID, it's extremely hard. I would say, like I said, next week I'm trying not to do any client work. I'm also writing a book. So instead of, trying to fit the book in at night, I have writing weeks. But look at your week. I've also, when I work with my clients and for myself, there's been many times when I've decided to get up earlier to create more time in my day. So I'm up every day around 5:30, working out and getting that in. And then I have a few hours to do some work before that. So I would say see where you can add time to your days, but also see where you can add time to relax. This is more important than ever. And I know some folks, especially some of my clients, once it gets to a certain hour, they're just shutting down. And I strongly recommend that as well. It's been really hard because typically we're traveling during the holidays and we're not. So that's another thing. I think a lot of us are not taking those vacations. So don't forget that you need that vacation, but it may look a little different. So that's a little bit about me. And Jonathan, I think, are you moderating? How should we do this?
We kind of just throw questions at you from wherever.
Okay.
So just be ready, because
all right,
might come from the left of the screen or the right of the screen.
Okay. Sounds good.
I'll start off maybe with the first question, which is, the title of this webinar is Using Emotional Intelligence in DEI Career Service Leadership. I often tell our students that the same way that one may reframe their emotions can be applied to how we reframe experience. That it really is a matter of reflection, prayer, meditation, whatever the hell you want to call it. I was just curious your approach to emotional intelligence and how that's related to career education.
Yeah. So I shared a slide, and I'm not sure if someone could share it on the screen. I think I might even be able to. Let me see if I can do it.
I'm going to go ahead and share it as a PDF
great.
with everyone. So you can just go ahead and start talking and everyone can open that up on their own.
Okay, yeah. So one of the things that I shared with the group is a model called the EQI 2.0 model. And so one of the areas that I do coaching around is emotional intelligence. And so the EQI model, it's a model it's the only scientifically validated model for emotional intelligence. You'll see a lot of books written, and they're not really based on really any real data or validation. It's also reliable, and so one of the reasons why I decided to go in this direction is because when I first started coaching, I was coaching a lot of academics, and they really want something that is scientifically validated and reliable. But as you'll see in the PDF, there are 5 main areas of EQI and emotional intelligence. And Jonathan, as you talked about, the first one is self-perception. So it's self-regard. How do you see yourself? How do you see the world? Do you have a positive outlook? What is that like? And so understanding yourself and measuring your outlook on the world. The EQI also it takes the self-perception quality, and it creates a happiness index. So that relates to that as well. And then we have self-expression. This is how you express yourself with other people, how assertive you are, how independent you are. This is important too, because as leaders, and if you're thinking about DEI, if you're overly independent or you lead people to be overly independent, then that's obviously not going to create as inclusive of a workplace. So that's where this is important. Interpersonal relationships, I talk a lot about empathy in my keynotes, empathy and psychological safety. And so that's the big piece here. So with this, you're aware of your interpersonal relationships, and you're able to have empathy for others' experiences, and you're able to at least try to see it from others, see others' experiences, or be in other people's shoes and see their experiences, what I'm saying. And so so that's the third piece that when I talk about emotional intelligence. The fourth is decision making. How are you making these decisions? Are you making decisions based on reality? Are you making them, or are you impulsive? DEI requires a lot of patience, and so impulsive decision making is something that you cannot have during that time. And then stress management, and this is really important because again, a lot of folks that I've been working with, they're very stressed out when it comes to DEI because they're stressed about the damage that they might have done, and it's really important and to move forward instead of dwelling on the past and getting people there. So these are the 5 traits of emotional intelligence that I most often refer to, and again, these are validated by the EQI assessment. I want everybody to have a copy of that because I'm going to refer to this a lot today. But yeah, in what you said, it does relate to how we see the world. I mean, you really how you see the world, and when you look at the EQI assessment, it impacts your happiness. It impacts your happiness. It impacts, how you relate to other people. It impacts to who you gravitate towards. All of those things. So yeah, that's very important when it comes to emotional intelligence.
LaTonya, what's some things that we can be teaching our students right now? I say that because we're obviously in this pandemic, and I'm a firm believer that whenever crisis / adversity hits us, it just makes us better and stronger, more resilient, more innovative, more creative, curiosity, the whole nine. I know that's not the same for everyone because some people get depressed, sad, all the other great stuff. But I also feel that we'll come out better on the other end based upon that. And what are some things we as practitioners in the field around career development can do around EI in some regards to help our students navigate and move through this times as well? Because talking to my students last week, fatigued, although this week is final, so they're done after this week. They won't come back to January to school. But we know when we come back in January, we're still going to be in a hybrid model moving forward. And so how do I build some things in them or some suggestions you think to work with them in these times?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big ones, it goes back to interpersonal, and it's empathy, and so teaching students how to have empathy, not just you having empathy with them, but them having empathy with each other, especially as we're moving through COVID. Some people are affected more than others, and I think when you're looking at students, there's sometimes there's an attitude that this doesn't really affect us as much. We're not going to get as sick. But then you look at the Black community, and a lot of these students that I talk to, as you know, Black communities are disproportionately affected by COVID-19. Many of them have lost family members through COVID. So I think it's teaching them empathy so they can be more inclusive of their classmates that may be in different socioeconomic classes, maybe different races, maybe different cultures. And I think that's a big disconnect. I guess that you might see like a frat boys partying at the same time where you're seeing Black students, they're at home with their families, and some of their families, like I said, we disproportionately suffer from pre-existing conditions, and those very pre-existing conditions that are killing most people in COVID. I think the second thing is, again, self-perception and really being honest with yourself and understanding where you are, understanding, your outlook on this, and not pretending that everything's okay, like truly understanding what this is doing to you, what's changed, and how you're going to continue to adjust. I think that's the second thing. With students, the third one I would say is stress management. And the big one is, how are they managing their stress? I mean, there's stress in the school year anyways, through class, through tests, and now that's magnified because we're doing things online. We're not able to meet with our friends and be able to get that peer support. There's a lot of adjustments that we're making to the way that classes are being taught. So those are the big things. And with stress management, it's really around asking students or helping students understand what their stress tolerance is and what they do when they're stressed. Some people tend to move away from other people. Some people tend to move towards other people. But understanding what you're doing when you're stressed out, so then they can understand and they can identify when it's a problem before it's too late. And that's where a lot of people are at. It's just things blow up before they even know it.
Question. So there's a lot of conversation in regards to anti-racist leadership in career services and higher education. For you, what does that look like in regards to utilizing emotional intelligence or any other skills that you think could assist in that?
Yeah, that's an interesting topic. And I think when that comes back in with the empathy category. So I've been in several conversations this week, and they've been tense. they're all been with executives that are really trying to move the needle on DEI in their organizations. And some have been with executives and some have been with their respective leadership teams. And one of the things, the big theme that keeps coming out of that is empathy and the lack of empathy. That it's crazy because it's so one person that talked about this or that was challenging or made this tense discussion, and tense discussions are good. I mean, I'll tell you, there are no changes unless people talk and, white men really say what they need to say. And that's what I want them to do. I don't want them to not, because then they're thinking it and it never really gets out there. But one talked about how he read Kindi's book, and he conflated anti-racism and socialism. And he was talking about Kindi's book and how those two go hand in hand. And this person was not a socialist. It was very, very against socialism. And again, in that situation, I think what happened is, as another person was talking about anti-racism and anti-Black racism, because this place was basically, this client wanted to, they were kind of going for a kumbaya approach until we started talking about anti-Black racism. And when the person,
I'm glad you said it that way, because it's like, how can you create change if you're not shedding a tear or two, right? I mean, our past is ugly, and let's just own it. Let's name it. Let's call it out and not repeat the same damn mistakes and keep it moving.
First step of the program is admitting you have a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Any program.
Yep. Yeah, it's really hard because people still, I mean, I think the other problem now is that there's so many people that are interested in this topic that it's become almost like too cliche, and they read one book and they think it's over. And Kindi's not the only person that talks about this, right? And so I had said to this, I facilitated the discussion, but it really needed more empathy, because you got to really listen to the perspective of other people and why the kumbaya is not enough anymore. And so then there was another discussion where it was someone cut someone off. And again, it was someone that was talking about anti-Black racism, because again, we're talking about DEI, but when it comes to anti-racism, people are still really scared to talk about it and what it means. And so you really have to go back to that. One other thing I would say is one thing that really helps me as a coach when I'm in these sessions and facilitating, and if you look back at the EQI model, is stress. Like if I know how someone handles stress, then I could facilitate the dialogue much better. Like I said, some people handle stress and they recant and they just sit back and they don't respond. They disengage. And then some people, they talk more and they get defensive and they're like, right, and they're sweaty, and that's how they deal with it. And so if you can identify what's really going on beneath the surface, then you can have these difficult conversations. Because when I'm team coaching and I can hear someone, I mean, back in the day, I used to be like, oh God, he has no clue, he's a racist, whatever. I don't even do that anymore, because that's not even what's going on. And that's a big jump. It's that person's stressed out and something's triggering them. And I know, because if I know how they respond when they're stressed out, then I can jump in and say, oh, it sounds like that was stressful for you. Maybe let's take a step back and, what would it look like to practice a little bit more empathy right now? And just taking steps back and peeling that away. So that's what's most important. That and knowing how people respond to stress. Also knowing how you respond to stress. A lot of us are going to get triggered in these conversations. So if you're the kind of person like Lynette did, she just took herself off mute and she was like, listen, let me tell you, if you are that kind of person, and that's okay, but know that, because you know that if you do that, know what's going to happen to the discussion, right? So you got to know yourself and be able to manage yourself. And that's what EQ is. EQI is, it's knowing yourself, it's knowing other people, how they're going to respond, and and responding it more intelligently.
LaTonya, can we go back to something you said? And I don't want to change the conversation too much, but I think it's still important to point out. You said something when you were introducing yourself about being over-mentored as opposed to being coached. Can you talk a little bit more about what it felt like to be overcoached? What does that look like?
Yeah.
Because I think there's a tendency, especially for women of color, people of color, to get over-mentored and not coached. So if you could talk more about that, I think that's important, because it'll be important about how we coach our students, right?
Yeah. All underrepresented folks are over-mentored and undercoached. I'm just going to say it. Every single one. And the reason why is because organizations started many years ago, right after the civil rights movement. People were mentors to other people. Okay, there are three different roles that are critical to development. One is a coach, one's a sponsor, and one's a mentor. Okay, but everybody, we focus for people of color on mentors. So let me tell you a little bit about these three. So assume you're going to be running a race, you're preparing for a marathon, right? So, and you want all three of these developmental roles to help you succeed. So your mentor is only going to share their experiences with you. They're going to share about any races they ran. They're going to share their experiences, what they did for their training plan, how it worked for them. Your coach is not going to share their experience. They're going to ask about your experience. They're going to help you design your experience, and they're going to be with you every step of the way. They're going to hold you accountable. If you say you're going to run 5 miles a day, they're going to run with you. They're going to let you drive your own agenda. You're going to self-author it. The coach is going to help you self-author your own experience based on what you know. The sponsor is going to be calling around, getting you in the Boston Marathon, getting you in the best races without you even knowing. And it's been a cop-out. And that's why there's been so many mentors, because it's easy to share your experience with others, right? People love to talk about themselves. They love to share their experience with others, but that's not doing anything. All that is creating more coffee dates and no more, and like a thicker glass ceiling, right? More people under that glass ceiling that are basically just, reminiscing with each other. And it's not a powerful, it's not an empowered interaction. It's not. And I'm not saying please do mentor. I do think we need it, but we're over mentored. Most of the clients, especially underrepresented folks that I coach, have never had a coach before. And they're like, oh, I never knew what that was like. Because I'm not telling you, I'm not judging you. If you tell me that you want to, I don't want to wear your hair a certain way, I don't care. We talk about what that looks like. We talk about what you want your brand to be, not what I think your brand should be, because that's the brand that worked for me. So it's definitely an issue. And with students, I think there's been some universities that have, and I know every university can't do this, but some universities I know, for example, the Kelley School of Business, they're offering career coaching for their students. That is real coaching. It's not necessarily advising, and it's helping them kind of forge a path. I think all of you should read. There's a book called The Coaching Habit, and it's by, has anybody read it? Michael Stingway Bennett. Okay, so Lynette, you read it, and I'll put the link in the chat. Everybody should read that book, because coaching is you're listening more than you're talking, and no one truly knows what that really means. And so reading that book will change the way that you interact with students. And if you think you're coaching, you're probably not, and that book will help you do it.
I often contend that the questions are more important than the answers. My sense of the difference between coaching and advising, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I only have a year of experience in career education, is that coaching is more focused on the questions and tapping into that inner truth of your client or of your student. Is that accurate, or can you add to that?
Yeah. So it's assuming you're collaborating with the student to create their own future and to create their own awareness and create their own change. And I think the third thing is, it's not a hierarchical relationship. It's you are equal partners, and with that, you're assuming that your students are creative, resourceful, and whole. Like there's nothing that needs to be fixed. it's like, I remember when with my first coach that I had, oh gosh, he was not good. He basically told me that he was trying to fix me. He was trying to prepare me for corporate by fixing me and telling me how to do my hair. And he told me, I will never forget this. He was a black man as my coach. He told me that I should not share my lifestyle in interviews. And so that is advising, and that's what people know. And I'm telling you, this is what our students still hear.
Yeah, that's
They
the
still,
foundation of career
yeah,
development, that kind of
yeah,
talks. Go right
it
ahead.
is.
In career
Binary
services and
dress,
higher ed. Yeah.
yeah.
So
Women,
awful.
men, binary dress. It's not,
Awful.
you can talk more about non-binary. Don't talk in terms of men and women. But yes, it's fixing someone to succeed in society, which was the story of my career. And I don't want to change the whole discussion, but that was a story of my career before, I kind of started self-authoring my own experience after my coach training.
Yeah, I believe I was going to write this in a chat, so I'll just say it out loud. I believe we already have the truth within us, the inner truth. So the 5%ers, they call it the knowledge of self. I feel like any religious faith or, practice really draws on that idea of, the yogi, it's integration of the mind, body, and soul and the spirit. And the coach simply unlocks that inner truth. So it's no different than how Coach Doc Rivers brings out the best in his players, unlocking and helping students reveal that truth.
Absolutely. I'm looking at some of these comments. Oh, thank you for putting that's the book. Yes. And then thank you, Sheila. That's another great resource. Yes. Institute of Coaching is a good one.
I'm pausing because of what I heard you say about a person coaching you to not be your authentic self. And I struggle with that for a couple of different reasons. Because with our students, I think Sean said it best. Our field is based upon basically assimilation. And so
yes.
in that regard, I struggle with that right now in talking to employers, right? Because I keep telling them, turn the mirror on yourself, turn the mirror on yourself, because you're a homogenous culture. You want me to bring you all this great diversity to your organization, but there's going to be an exit quickly because you're not letting people show up as their authentic selves. And I know that we have to, as my dad would say, slow walk people around this whole idea of anti-racism, this whole idea of inclusion, this whole idea of belonging moving forward as far as that is concerned. But hearing you say that is a struggle for me and probably for many of us on this call today of trying to work with employers. Do you have any suggestions or ideas that we can do to work with employers? Prime example, I know we're doing something internally at UNC around a diversity, equity, and scorecard that we'll roll out next month at SOACE, at least on a basic level. We have 3 levels to it. The basic level you can get for free, everything else you got to pay for. So I say that because our employers are just cramming, coming to us. We want more diversity, want more diversity. We've even been told in certain departments and schools, like, hey, if you can't give us diversity, we won't be able to support you. Yet, I argue we're doing something different. We're collaborating with our HBCUs in our area to do some things. I struggle with that because, again, my thing is the employers are so homogenous from a cultural standpoint that they have not turned the mirrors on themselves to be able to say, oh, we need to break down our own idiosyncrasies, our own issues before I bring somebody else in the house and they don't feel like they belong in the house.
Yeah, that's really hard. Yeah, that's a hard one because it's, I will tell you that I know that one person told me that there's still companies that recruit on campus that ask women to wear nylons. And I think it gets to the point where your university has to have values, and you have to work with the companies around, what are your values? And I also think what if would it be a big deal? Would it be too bold or radical to say, if you don't think you're going to fit into the culture, don't apply. And then those companies won't get students applying. I mean, I think that we're perpetuating it. And I'd like to hear from other people what they do, because I think we're perpetuating it if we're telling students to be someone they're not to get a job, right? Instead of saying, be yourself, and if it doesn't work out, then something else is going to come along. Or be yourself, and if we get a bunch of people, conglomeration of people being themselves, then those types of companies will stop recruiting on your campus, right?
It's funny you mentioned that, because that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at right now. I'm like, I'm ready to tell people, like, you no longer, and I know I'll catch hell for this, but you're not welcome based upon some of the things our students come back and tell us, right? We had one employer who said some things in the actual interview. So we reached out, it was actually one of their recruiters that said some things that really came off wrong in the interview. So we reached out to that organization. Of course, they said they would handle it internally, but we decided to not ban them, but would not allow them to the next fair. And so they took care of that situation. We're at this point right now where everybody is gearing up for spring. I'm paying attention to the data. So we're seeing certain industries actually boom right now, and certain industries are just dying because they don't know how to adjust to this post-pandemic world. And in that, a lot of these fields are also fields that are, again, I'll go back to the very white, very homogenous in some regards. And so I am literally having to play coach that I don't get extra money for, to teach them how to do their best practices on recruiting our students. Now, I firmly believe it's, all our students should have access, equitability, the whole nine moving forward. But I'm just struggling right now because I want to tell certain employers, like, hey, you know what, come back to us in about 6 months to a year, when you literally do some things internally to change your culture or your organization that our students feel like they can show up. Specifically, people will probably get on me for this, but if I look at the banking industry, the investment industry, where a lot of our business students end up going, is literally still white male driven. I have purposely driven a lot of students of color to purposely get more white males to mentor them or coach them in some regards, but coach them with the authenticity that they're showing up as who they are. I'm also putting their feet to the fire because they're saying they want diversity. And I'm like, well, show me that by taking these 4 students underneath your wing and making sure that they are your boss one day. So I struggle with that, but I would love to hear from other people on the call as well today who might be dealing with the employer side or just in general trying to navigate.
I'll throw something else into the mix, which is, and I think it was something that you said earlier, LaTonya, about the environment that you worked in that was very toxic and violent, and how that organization was doing good work out in the community, and yet inside was perpetuating many of the same things that they're trying to solve outside. And so we as career centers as well, putting that light on ourselves, right? It's not just the employers. It's oftentimes our organizations too, perpetuating those same things.
Right. Yeah, I would love to hear how people are navigating that. I mean, are you feeling enough safety to just let things work how they work, or are you still finding yourself conforming?
Go ahead, Sheila. Sheila, it looks like you turned on your video. You're ready to share.
She got serious.
Yeah,
she turned on the video.
I figured I'd
Please share.
I don't have a fully thought out. I feel these tensions too. And I think the tension for us is this pressure to bring more and more employment opportunities, and the fear that students feel in landing a job versus like knowing that encouraging them to land a job where they'll be really happy and whole, and just kind of, and we take a coaching approach too. So I'm very much like, I've had students ask me like, is my hair okay? And I'm like, these are like the pros and cons that you might consider, you know, and I can't tell you what to do. Like everything is a trade-off or a risk or, you know, anyway. So, but yeah, we feel these tensions and I want us to, so Courtney is on the call today and she's literally just started this week on our team in our employer relations role. And so we're going to be thinking about these things a bit, but like, how do we push employers a little bit more? Like how do we advocate from our position, but while still getting enough opportunities? Because then we get the pressure from students who are like, oh, you're not bringing the right people, or there's not enough opportunities and that kind of thing. So anyway.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's the way that you practice as well. Yeah, it's. I mean, what I'm hearing, Sheila, too, is it's not an easy fix, right? Because it's two conflicting priorities, and one is one party saying, let's get as many folks in here as possible, and the other saying, well, you just slow down. This is not really for me, but you know, I need to have 5 offers. But do you need to have more than even 2 offers or even 1 offer? It's a constant struggle, and what we're talking about, and again, I don't want to take us to a whole different place, but the structures and systems that really hold us back in this DEI space, where, you know, as a career service professional, the structure and the system is more around quantity of employers rather than quality, and how do you work within that? It's like I was talking to someone yesterday, and we're talking about mitigating these systems and mitigating, and this is the system. So at what point do you break it, right? What point do you break it and put it back together? And I think I'm sort of optimistic because I'm starting to see more and more companies that are coming to campuses and they're saying, hey, we want to be able to interview more Black employees or more queer candidates and other types of candidates. And so we really want you to bring us those students. And if you can't, then we'll go somewhere else. And so we're starting to see that happen. And so hopefully that gives some students more attractive, you know, options, but it's slow going, but it's happening.
Well, and what you were describing makes me think of an abolitionist approach where you're dismantling the system. Yeah. And the question always becomes, well, what parts of it are you dismantling? Is it the entire system? And then what are we left with? And what do we rebuild? I think that oftentimes becomes the challenge or the question is where to start? What do we tear down?
And I think the conversation, I know at least for us, and Susan, you can chime in because you work with employers more than I do lately, is that there's not the consideration that career development would be cognizant that DEI is important as we're doing our work. And so I think it's something so new in that we would even be tackling it, that all that we're thought of is the people that give folks a job. We know that's part of what we do. And so we're just really beginning to have the conversation where career development we just had an event yesterday, and my sister Lynette was on the panel, where we could frame career development with a DEI slant. So it's a new concept because it's only thought of only these people in higher ed. This department handles that. Not career services, not career development, but it's an essential part if we say we care about all students. So, and I think it's something it's the concept for us, at least I think is still something that's so new that you wouldn't even think to put those two together, but we know because we're practitioners that it's so important for our students and how we coach and care, what I say, coach and care for our students.
Well, and that goes along with what we're doing with the career fairs, Sean, where we're almost looking at dismantling the process of some of the virtual career fairs during COVID, where they are appointment-based instead of allowing all students in to have the opportunity to speak with the employers. We seem to have moved to this platform where you have to sign up at career fairs to speak with an employer, and that leaves all kinds of students out on all different types of levels, from GPAs to class standing to what the employers are looking for as far as their criteria. And we're about to have a discussion on how we can do that whole process better and not exclude anyone and allow everyone to have access to those employers who want to come and recruit.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what we do as career professionals is help our students realize their value, realize their power. It's that self-actualization. And I think part of what we need to do as career professionals is realize the power that we have. Like, we are a broker of relationships between employers who need our students, and they need each other. But I think we hold, particularly as a block, you think of all of the power of just on this call, our institutions and all the employers and students that are connected by the way of our respective offices throughout the country at universities, and leveraging that influence and that power to make considerable change by communicating expectations in the way that Dr. Bates did about what it means to have access to our students. What do we expect of you?
Especially in a city like Detroit, where, you know, there are employers and there are many people of color, and like Wayne State is centered like right in Midtown. And so it just makes sense that employers would have a certain empathy, right, and sensitivity, and also want to build relationships with our university. So those are the new conversations that we're starting to have and will have, and how they should be looking at our students, right? Because we say that we are one of the most diverse campuses. So, all right, employers, here we are.
I'm curious, does anyone, a couple of things I'm thinking about is like when we have employers register for the career fair, I know this is not like a fit, but having them put in if they have a diversity policy or like what their diversity policies are, but also like we usually give them materials, right, about like the school, but what if we included something like, here's a fact sheet on like bias in the hiring process, or like some things you could do to make your job descriptions more equitable. Like it's an opportunity to educate them at that touch point.
So I'm doing something that is similar to what you're talking about, Sheila, and thank you for being here. You're one of our founding members and viewers, so thanks for the love all the way from my hometown of Boston, Massachusetts, you know, Cambridge, holla. But I'm doing something at Northeastern Illinois University here in Chicago, Illinois, and in partnership with our Assistant Dean of Undocumented Student Services. I approached her on my idea recently to have a spring 2021 or fall 2021 undocumented student career fair or career day, where, you know, employers who are seeking to hire our interns for summer internships or permanent full-time jobs, because they'll be graduating soon, and it's twofold from our career development department, right? We have to career coach our students on questions to ask, meaningful questions to ask, because again, this is going to be a virtual event, to our employers. But I'm also thinking about, on the employer side, what to give to them to educate them that they can hire our documented students, our dreamers, for particular opportunities. You know, they won't need sponsorship, for example, and just really having that education piece. So that's something that I'm planning to do, you know, at our campus for next semester or fall semester. So, you know, I implore anyone on the call today to think about that. And that's just with one particular population that, as you can imagine, everyone that is in desperate need for career and internship experience, and is overshadowed a lot of the time as well.
That's awesome.
That sounds amazing, Annette.
LaTonya, they unleashed a beast over here in NEIU, Chicago, Illinois. You know.
Well, and I do think, yeah, we are the future. I mean, we could do whatever we want. I mean, what are people going to do about it? Right? I mean, you're there for the student.
They're going to slap my hand for doing my job. Okay.
You're there for the student.
Please go do that. Exactly.
So any other questions? I would love to hear from other folks if people are up to it. I know we're a little Zoom fatigued, but if anyone would like to come off mute.
I'm going to put this person on blast, but if she's available, Dr. Aries, if you're there, would love to hear your perspective as well in scholarship, thought leadership.
She might have stepped away.
I'll offer something up. In terms of being woke, there's this idea of being woke, right? And I was sitting with, I like to play with words. And I was thinking of our country experiencing both an economic crisis, social unrest. All of these things have existed, right, for some time. The pandemic. And I think that we're experiencing a bit of a spiritual crisis. And I think of a need for a spiritual awakening of sorts. When I came into career education a year ago, I was pleasantly surprised that we were talking about purpose and meaning and things that I hold to be very spiritual. And again, I think of it in terms of secular, spiritual, and religious meaning making. But yeah, I was just kind of curious in the sense of emotional intelligence, and for you, LaTonya, how that might connect to this notion of emotional intelligence. Because I think it's the self, but it's also a recognition of, for me, there's that of God within me, just as if there is that of God within you, and it's the recognition of community and our interconnection.
Yeah, and so that goes back to self-actualization and well-being, which is part of the EQI model. And the more self-actualization that you have, the happier you are, the better your relationships are. Like, all these things go hand in hand. And so if you really want to be emotionally intelligent or increase your competence in this area, then you do have to do the deep spiritual work. Jonathan, I also call us in an awakening. I've never heard a lot of people describe it as that. And part of that is, looking inward and really grappling with some hard questions around your purpose. A lot of people don't want to do this. It's not an easy exercise to do. And what I tell people is it's lifelong, and there is research that says that self-actualized people are better leaders. They're more confident. They're easier to approach. They have more empathy because they're pretty much okay with themselves, so they want to give that. They want to bring that to others. And so so that's how it relates. And yeah, I strongly encourage all of you to think about that. One of the books that I read, I actually refer back to it a lot. It's the 7 Secrets to Spiritual Success, Deepak Chopra, and that's got a lot in there around self-actualization and being and achieving your largest self and your purpose. If that answers. And I know you talked about being woke, and I don't even know what that means anymore, honestly.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means. I think it's become like more of a trend and a fad. And so I hate using that word because it's like it's almost competitive and it doesn't feel spiritual, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, words are words.
Yeah.
Symbols are symbols, right? I changed my Facebook image to the American flag during the election just because I was like, when did this flag become symbolic of conservatism, right? Or Republicans are tied to Trump? I was like, let me reclaim this flag, even though I was never the one to, like, even before all that, wave a flag around, because I got my own criticisms of US foreign policy, and all of that, but I'm not going to go there right now. And so, yeah, woke, in many ways, I feel like we have to get past the race and the gender identity, but it's not to be colorblind, because to be colorblind is to dismiss the reality that these are social constructions and that they are real and that inequities are real. And it's this paradox that at the same time, we have to embrace the shared humanity, that interconnection that we share. So it is an aspirational goal, but you kind of have to go through it, not around it. Like, you got to do that difficult work. Organizations have to do that inner work in order to, at any point, get there. And we're nowhere near that. So we must continue to, I guess, become woke.
Yeah, yeah, and one of the things you talked about is organizations doing that, and I talk a lot about my book is about leading below the surface. So there's all this stuff above the surface where we talk about, like, the things when I talked about culture and organizations and really doing this inner work and purpose work. Culture at the top, it's the things you see, and then in the middle, it's the things that you know, and at the bottom, it's the things that you do. And like, you see all these, when you see things, organizations focus on those see things, and those see things are, you know, their websites and their values and their perks, and then you have the know things, which are strategy and things that people talk about inside. But the do thing is where we all struggle, and that's where you really build that psychological safety. But the do piece is below the surface, and this is how the work really gets done. And the way that really gets done is in a way that's painful, and it's not in a way that is emotionally intelligent all the time. And there's always a big disparity between, you know, what you see and what you actually do. Like, you might see that this company, you know, has Black people working there, but you actually, you know, from the outside, and you get in there, and when you look at what they do, they're not very inclusive. And you know, you talk to them, and they're not very happy. And so yeah, you definitely have to go through that. And it's all about, you know, what we do. And as we talked about, it's really up to us, because we are the change, and we can make that change. And we have to help our organizations kind of, you know, live through this reckoning right now.
Yeah, and Sheila just shared in the chat, and I just read the description of this book, The Great Work of Your Life. And I always find it's really fascinating that so many spiritual practices essentially say the same thing, I think. And so in this particular book, it looks like it's a focus on Hinduism, if I'm not mistaken. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Sheila. But using those metaphors, using those stories, and essentially it's connected to purpose. It's really not that complicated. All of these things are very simple at the end of the day. I like the idea that truth reveals itself, that we already know it deep inside. It's just this reminder through reading a book like this or having a conversation like what we're hearing today.
And I appreciate that we have those resources in the chat box. Jonathan, you're able to save it, correct? On your end? At the end of the session. Okay, good.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to end early. I think I would welcome that if we need to.
Yeah,
I think we were talking about behind the scenes between my fellow Career View colleagues and I. So I will flip the mic to Jonathan right now.
So are there any, I'll pause for any last questions. It does appear that we're winding down, and we're gonna go ahead and end this a little early. We usually go an hour and a half, but I'm sure all of us can find something to do with the, you know, remaining 25 minutes. Are there any other questions? I saw Heather just turned her video on. If you had any questions, Heather, or comments?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me, Jonathan?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay,
Please.
awesome. One of the things, John, I really liked your statement about reclaiming things like an image of the American flag. I've been thinking about reclaiming the word professionalism. That's a system we need to break so that more students have access in more areas. I think, Dr. Bates was talking about the areas of finance and banking and how sort of like rigid they can seem. And then LaTonya, I'm looking at your slide of your areas of emotional intelligence. And I'm sitting here thinking, if I can get students active in all of those areas and really reflecting there, that I can get the student to realize that that's maybe, is that maybe where your professionalism lies? I know John, you might've been in on this, like last week, there was a talk. Oh, thank you. There was a talk you were talking about doing away with etiquette and just how like inaccessible all of that stuff is. And I'm also thinking about, career fairs in person, how we tell students, well, dress up, is that accessible if I'm coming from lab, if I'm coming from, wherever it happens to be. So I'm just curious, like what things should we be coaching students with in regards to professionalism these days?
Yeah, I'll first say that, and it's in this article that I linked to that I wrote on LinkedIn a few months ago, which is that I don't have, me personally, a problem with the word professionalism. I have a problem with what it's been implied to mean. So if you look at the NACE definition of professionalism, it's professionalism / work ethic. And nowhere in that definition does it say anything about what you look like or what you wear. It's about integrity, right? It's about what's inside you and how you engage with other people, how you treat them with respect. And so I think it's really fascinating, right? You're wearing a hoodie, I'm wearing a thobe, we're comfortable, we're at home, work is coming home, home is coming to work. It raises a lot of questions about what the hell is professional? What is professional dress, I don't know. I'd be interested in others in terms of that coaching, right? I think that's similar to what Sheila said in terms of hair. I'm not going to tell you whether or not this may be professional or not. I think we need to have a conversation about the reality of the world, the same way that you identify as Black and you're wearing a fro, or you're a man and you're painting your nails. What is the impression that someone's going to make of you? What the reality, right? We can have a conversation about normatively how the world should be. And we also simultaneously can have a conversation about how the world is and what the implications, both pros and cons, may be. At the end of the day, you're a grown ass adult and you're going to have to make a decision, because I don't have the answers. We all are going to arrive at a different calculation depending on our values, what's important to us. But I do think we're in an interesting time where a lot of that is being raised. Like, what happens when we do return to the work environment? Are you going to wear a hoodie, right? You were doing your job all this time at home with a hoodie. Are you not able to do that work in a hoodie anymore? I think I want to believe that you should be able to just wear a hoodie. To hell with the suit. I get mad when I see people wearing a full suit on a Zoom call. I'm like, you're in your house. Be comfortable. But that's just me.
I actually had a student tell me, we had a regent on campus, and I was wearing a black blazer and dress pants on, and I tend to dress more androgynously, but the student came in and was like, hey, career counselor, are you going to a funeral? And I was like, holy cow, that is not what I was trying to portray. They're used to me being a little more chill, but I was just like, wow, is that how students are perceiving me? And we've gotten feedback too when we've had, male identified interns, like, hey, lose the tie. We're not here for that. Like, okay, but that's what, the vice chancellor is expecting of us as far as our professionalism. But you're right. I've heard Sean say before too, this is professional because I'm wearing it and I'm a professional. So exactly what you're saying, So
but we also need to have an honest conversation about, and this is what I'm hyper mindful of. I've been in career coaching now 17 years. Mm-hmm. So I am at a point in my career that I can either wear my big hoop earrings or my pearl studs, for example, right? I mean, you can't really see it because of my amazing background, but I don't know if entry level professionals can do that as of yet. I don't know if college students can do that as of yet. And maybe that might be another talk for spring 2021, Jonathan, that to kind of coach each of us as career service professionals and employer partners to talk about what that means, right? For more executive level professionals versus more entry level professionals, and what rules can be broken, what rules can be remade or reimagined. But that's for another day. But Heather, definitely appreciate that perspective, because it is deep, right? And it's real.
Yeah, thank you, Heather, for sharing. Well, I think on that note, we will end the show. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us, LaTonya. LaTonya's LinkedIn account is in there, so highly encourage you to get in touch with her if her and the services that she provides may be of value to you or your organization. Any last words, LaTonya, before we...
No, I hope this is an indication that people are starting to relax before the holiday, and I am not mad at that. So yes, I'm happy to end early, and I know that the last couple months have been crazy, and especially here in Illinois, our COVID numbers are going through the roof. So we've got another little shelter in place in order. So I know there's a lot on people's minds. So take some time off, and yeah, let's stay in touch.
Very good. Be well and take care, everyone.
Can we give LaTonya a virtual round of applause of thank you? Really appreciate your scholarship and your executive leadership in this space. And please join us for our January, the Career View. We'll put you on our emailing list. And thank you, everyone. Happy break. Happy Indigenous, or maybe not so happy Indigenous Peoples Day for next week, honoring our brothers and sisters of Native American background, and looking forward to seeing you all in the new year. There will be no December Career View. We are taking a complete break. But thank you, everyone. Take care. Be blessed. Stay safe. Stay encouraged. Stay in touch.